You arrive tonight not through a door, but through something softer, a veil of incense smoke, a whisper wrapped in dusk, a thought that feels like it belonged to someone you once were. This is a journey into ancient rituals, the ones forgotten by time, but never by the soul. Maybe your body is tired, or maybe your heart is holding a quiet ache that even you cannot name. But there is a reason you're here. And perhaps, deep down, you've always longed for the world behind the world where people once knelt before stars, offered water to the moon, or placed flowers in the mouth of the wind. Tonight, we won't chase answers. We will remember them through fire chants in India, bone dances in Papua, and the slow sipping of coffee in Ethiopia as if it were a prayer. Each story a forgotten ritual. Each ritual a mirror you didn't know you were looking into. Let your spine melt into the surface below. Release the weight in your shoulders. Unclench the muscles around your thoughts. Now take a slow, gentle breath, as if the night itself were breathing with you. If you find yourself floating through this story, feel free to stay a while. Subscribe if it feels right, and let me know which ritual calls your name. And now let the sleep-soft mist of time carry you to a place where the fire still burns, where the wind still listens, where rituals are not lost, only waiting. The fire does not begin with flame. It begins with silence. Before the first spark, there is a bowl of milk still, trembling under the weight of intention. There is breath. There is mantra. There is the sun, just brushing the edge of the sky. And then, with a whisper barely above thought, the flame comes alive. Not with a roar, but with a murmur as if it has always been speaking, and you are only now remembering how to listen. You are in ancient India now. Not the India of temples and ruins or tourist-laden cities, but the India before language turned into scripture, before knowledge became writing, when wisdom was passed from one soul to another through the rhythm of fire and chant. This is Agnihotra, the Vedic ritual of sacred fire. The word Agni means fire, and Hotra means offering. But this is not just about burning things. It is about feeding the mouth of the cosmos. Twice a day at sunrise and at sunset, practitioners offer milk, ghee-clarified butter, and sacred herbs into the fire, accompanied by soft Vedic chants. The ritual is exact. The timing must align with the planetary energies of the sun's movement. The fire must be kindled in a small copper pyramid. The mantras must be spoken in precise tones, passed down orally through thousands of years. The smoke that rises is not considered waste, it is considered speech. A whisper from earth back to sky. What makes Agnihotra remarkable is not just its age, it is one of the oldest continuously practiced rituals in human history, dating back at least 3,500 years. But the way it sees fire not as a symbol, but as a living deity. In the Rigveda, fire Agni is the mouth of the gods, the carrier of offerings, the bridge between the visible and invisible worlds. You do not burn things in Agnihotra, you feed the divine. And in return, the divine listens. Let yourself imagine it now. The sound of the cow being milked just before dawn. The copper pot reflecting the first light. The priest, barefoot in the dew, standing still like a tree remembering wind. He says the words softly, Suryaya Svaha, Agnaya Svaha. To the sun, I offer. To the fire, I offer. And then the flames rise. And something changes. Not in the world, but in you. As if something buried remembers heat again. as if the part of you that forgot how to bow is bowing. Agnihotra is not reserved for monks or priests alone. Even today, in villages across India and Nepal, families still light the sacred fire twice a day in their homes. Children grow up with the smell of ghee, the rhythm of the mantras, the hush of reverence. In a world rushing forward, this is a ritual that asks you to pause, to synchronize with something cosmic, not digital, to measure time not in emails, but in ash. There are studies today, modern, scientific, that claim Agnihotra smoke purifies the air, balances soil pH, even reduces harmful microbes. But perhaps the greatest purification is in the one you cannot see, the slow healing of the inner clock, the quiet return to alignment, the remembrance that life is not just made of tasks, it is also made of offerings. And maybe this ritual is not just Indian. Maybe you have always known this fire, in the way your grandmother lit incense without explaining why, in the way you stare at candlelight when lost in thought, in the way heat, rhythm, silence, and offering are built into your very body. You are not a stranger to fire. You are a descendant of it. As the flames lower, the mantra ends. The copper bowl cools. The silence returns. And in that silence, something ancient bows back. There is a moment just after the body has been washed and wrapped, when the desert wind still clings to the linen, and the tomb hums low with a silence too ancient to name. You stand there, as they once did priests in white, barefoot, breathless, surrounding the figure of the one who has left this world, but has not yet entered the next. This is not mourning. It is not even farewell. This is a ritual of awakening. The ancient Egyptians believed that death was not an end, but a transition into another state of being, a passage not unlike birth, but in reverse. Instead of a soul entering a body must be taught how to re-enter the soul, to pass safely into the afterlife. The spirit of the deceased needed more than burial. They needed to be restored to speak again, to breathe again, to eat and drink in the realm of Osiris. And so, before entombment, the priests performed a ritual known as the opening of the mouth, a ceremony to reawaken the senses of the dead, to give them back their voice. Imagine it, a sculpture of the deceased, a perfect likeness carved in stone stands at the head of the tomb. The mummy lies still nearby, wrapped tightly, the hands crossed over the chest. Incense curls upward from a burning brazier, and the priest holds in his hand a sacred tool, the adze, curved like the crescent moon. He approaches the statue. He lifts the adze to its lips, touches the mouth, then the eyes, then the ears. Each touch is a whisper to the spirit awaken. See, speak, return. He does the same to the mummy, lightly, precisely, with reverence older than memory. Other priests chant spells from the pyramid texts, some dating back more than 4,000 years. They offer bread and beer, water and salt, as if to remind the soul what it means to be human, to nourish, to taste, to feel thirst quenched again. But this is not superstition. This is technology of the sacred. The Egyptians believed that the body was a vessel, but it was the mouth, the act of speaking, that made a person fully alive. Without speech, there could be no prayer, no naming of the gods, no invocation of the Ba and Ka, the twin spirits of personality and life force. And so, to open the mouth was to return identity. The ritual draws on a mythology that stretches beyond time. According to the ancient texts, the first opening of the mouth was performed by the god Horus, who opened the mouth of his father Osiris so he could rise from death and reign over the underworld. Each time the ceremony is repeated for a human, it is a reenactment of that divine resurrection, not a metaphor, but a continuation. And perhaps that is what makes this ritual so extraordinary. It blurs the lines between human and God, between body and spirit, between death and voice. Archaeologists have uncovered traces of this ceremony in tombs all across Egypt, from the Valley of the Kings to the pyramids at Saqqara. On the painted walls, you can still see images of priests touching the mouths of statues and mummies, chanting words like, "Your mouth is opened by Horus, with the iron of the gods. You shall eat, you shall drink, you shall speak the words of the gods." The tools were real. The adze, the peseshkef, a ritual knife, a vessel of natron water, and the sacred scepter, each one symbolic, each one alive in the hands of the priest. But beyond the tools there was feeling. There was the ache of farewell, mixed with the hope that this was not the end. And there was something else, something harder to name. The sense that words themselves carried power. That to speak a name was to keep it alive. That if the mouth could open again, the soul would find its way through the stars. Even now, the echoes of this ritual remain. In the way we place flowers on graves, in the soft things we say to the ones who've passed, even when no one is listening, in the quiet belief that maybe, somehow, they still hear us, and maybe they do. Maybe your voice carries farther than you think. Before the sun fully rises, before thought takes shape or language begins its quiet chatter, you are already standing in the water. The river is glacial, but it holds no malice. It does not resist you, it simply is. Like time, like silence, like breath before it is spoken. This is not an accident. You have come here for something. To be cleansed not just in body, but in rhythm. You are about to perform Misogi, the Shinto ritual of water purification. Unlike many rituals of the world that center around flame or incense, Misogi begins with cold, with the rush of moving water, the bite of morning wind, and the long exhale of letting go. In its simplest form, Misogi is the act of standing under a waterfall, river, or sea, and allowing the body to be purified not with soap, but with the ancient memory of nature itself. Its roots are as old as Japan itself, woven into the indigenous religion of Shinto, where spirits called kami dwell in all things, in trees, in stones, in streams, in the wind that moves between your fingertips. To the Shinto mind, impurity is not sin, it is imbalance. And balance can be restored by returning to what is elemental. The oldest textual reference to Misogi comes from the Kojiki, a Japanese chronicle compiled in 712 CE, which recounts the myth of the god Izanagi. After escaping the land of death Yomi, Izanagi is said to have washed himself in a river to rid the defilement of the underworld. As he bathed, divine beings were born from his cleansing, including the sun goddess, Amaterasu. Misogi, then, is more than a bath. It is a ritual of rebirth. But this myth lives on not only in temples, but in the modern world, where people still gather at sacred waterfalls, especially at dawn. They come wearing white, the color of purity. They perform deep breathing exercises called torafune, rocking the body back and forth in rhythmic unison to prepare the spirit and ignite internal fire. Then comes the cry, a shout like lightning in the morning fog. Harai tamai kiyome tamai, cleanse me, purify me. and they step into the water. Some are knee-deep. Others stand directly beneath the falls. The water crashes down like memory itself, relentless, heavy, honest. There is no room for lies here. Only breath. Only presence. In Misogi, purification is not passive. It requires endurance. Sometimes the ritual lasts only a few minutes. Sometimes, especially in ascetic practices known as Misogi Shugyo, it is repeated daily, for months in snow, in wind, even while chanting entire sections of the Norito, the sacred prayers. Modern practitioners, from martial artists to business people, have adopted Misogi as a means of spiritual resetting. It is used not just to purify before entering a shrine, but to clarify mind and purpose, to release emotional burdens, to realign the invisible currents within the self. It is said that Misogi is not about becoming something, it is about remembering what you are. Think of it as a conversation between your skin and the cosmos. Not loud, but deep. Even without words, there is meaning. The cold reminds you that you are alive. The wind reminds you that you are not alone. The river reminds you that you are never the same person twice. Some versions of the ritual incorporate salt thrown around the area, sprinkled onto the body, or stirred into the water itself. Salt, in Shinto, is a powerful absorber of spiritual impurity. It is often placed in small dishes outside homes, or poured in rings around sacred spaces. To wash with salt is to draw out what does not belong, to become transparent again. After the cleansing, participants bow toward the source, the waterfall, the mountain, the sea, and then to each other. No one speaks. The silence is part of the ritual. It is the sound of the ego leaving, of stories dissolving. There are many ways to be clean. This is the one that feels most like being unwritten. And perhaps that is what Misogi offers: not salvation, not achievement, but erasure. A gentle erosion of what is false, until only the core remains. Until you remember that you too are made of river, that you too can begin again. It begins not with clouds, but with drums, slow, hollow echoes that mimic the sound of distant thunder. The air smells of corn, earth, and limestone. And somewhere, deep within the jungle's silence, a boy carries a feather through the trees as if it were fire. This is not performance. This is invocation. You are witnessing the ancient Mayan Chaac ceremony, a sacred ritual to summon Chaac, the rain god, bringer of crops, thunder, and rebirth. Long before European maps ever learned the names of these lands, the Maya had built cities in the forest not of conquest, but of cosmology. They aligned their pyramids with stars, planted seeds according to Venus, and spoke to gods as if they lived next door. And among the most sacred conversations was the plea for rain, because without rain, nothing grew. And without growth, the entire cycle of time unraveled. Chaac was not merely prayed to, he was danced to, sung to, fed. The ritual to summon Chaac took place most commonly in cenotes deep, natural limestone sinkholes filled with turquoise water, which the Maya believed were the mouths of the underworld. These caves were sacred thresholds between human and divine, between drought and abundance. Imagine the scene: a group of priests, known as Chaacs, wearing jaguar skins and headdresses of bright quetzal feathers, gather around a cenote at dusk. Torches flicker. Cornmeal is scattered on the ground in spirals. They carry ceramic bowls of cacao, copal resin incense, and sometimes blood. Yes, blood. Because for the Maya, to give was to mirror the gods who, according to their mythology, shed their own divine blood to form the world. Through small self-offerings, a tongue, an earlobe, or in later times, even human sacrifice, they believed they were feeding Chaac what he had once given them life. But there is more to this than pain. There is a cosmic symmetry. The offering is not transactional. It is participatory. They are not begging the gods. They are reminding the universe of its own agreement. Above them, 4 boys, each representing one of the cardinal Chaacs: east, west, north, south, chant ancient names while holding gourds of water. These 4 directions are not arbitrary. They symbolize balance in the Mayan cosmos. Each Chaac wears the colors of his direction: red, white, black, and yellow. The boys are carefully chosen, often from noble lineages, often purified by days of fasting and silence. As the ceremony deepens, priests throw offerings into the cenote: jade beads, carved bones, and sometimes miniature figures made of dough. They believe the water carries these gifts down into Xibalba, the Maya underworld where Chaac listens. Then comes the call. A rhythmic chant begins, deep, nasal, and echoing. It rises and falls like storm winds through leaves. The drumming intensifies. And then, the conch shell sounds. A low moan that feels more like a memory than a sound. In some of the more solemn rituals, an animal, often a turkey or iguana, is released. If it returns to the circle, it is a sign Chaac has accepted. If it flees into the forest, more offerings may be needed. There are cave paintings, discovered near Chichen Itza, that show priests in mid-offering stance, hands raised toward the sky. As a stylized serpent cloud figure, Chaac rains blessings from above. These depictions are not just mythic. They are agricultural calendars, reminders that ritual and farming were not separate. One fed the other. But perhaps the most profound part of the Chaac ceremony was the way it made the unseen real. The wind was not just a force. It was the voice of a god. Rain was not just water. It was a reply. Every drop that hit the skin was a cosmic whisper: I heard you. Even today, some Maya communities in the Yucatan continue to perform a version of this ceremony, especially in times of severe drought. They may not throw jade into cenotes anymore, but they still offer prayers, cornmeal, and flowers. Still face the 4 directions. Still chant the names of Chaac. And somewhere, in the modern silence after the factories have stopped humming, and the sky glows with strange electric light, you may still feel it, that ancient human ache to speak to the rain, to feel that what falls from above is not random, but an answer. Maybe you've done it too. Stared out a window in a dry season, whispered a wish into the wind, opened your palm to the sky, and hoped. Perhaps that is ritual too. It is shaped like a dome low to the ground, woven from saplings, covered in hides or canvas, dark as the earth's breath. You enter on your knees, crawling forward into a silence thick with memory. And in that first moment, before the stones are brought in, before the door is closed, you realize something. You are going back into the womb of the earth, back into something older than fire, older than story. You are about to dissolve into the heat, not to be burned, but to be born. This is the Sweat Lodge ceremony, practiced across many Native American cultures, often referred to in Lakota tradition as inipi, meaning to live again. And it is not simply a bath. It is a ritual of rebirth, cleansing, and communion with the sacred. The lodge itself represents the womb of Mother Earth. Circular, enclosed, held together with willow branches and reverence. It stands beside a fire pit where the stone's grandfathers are heated until they glow red with ancestral breath. These stones are not just hot, they are alive with memory. Each one is chosen with prayer. Each one carries the whispers of mountains and the weight of sky. The ritual begins long before the sweat. It begins with intention, with quiet preparation. The fire tender carefully arranges the stones, feeding the flames with cedar and sweetgrass. Meanwhile, the participants remove distractions, phones, watches, names until they are simply breath and skin. Then the lodgekeeper calls all my relations. It is not a command. It is an invocation. Because in this ceremony, you are not alone. You are joined by ancestors, spirits, animals, stars, and silence itself. You crawl inside clockwise, always clockwise, entering through the low doorway, bowing low, leaving ego at the threshold. Once all are seated around the shallow pit, the door flap is closed, and you are swallowed in darkness. It is not just the absence of light. It is the return to the beginning. Then the door opens again, and the first stones are brought in glowing, radiant, humming with invisible thunder. They are placed gently in the pit. The door is sealed once more. Then the water comes. A ladle of sacred water is poured onto the stones, and with it, a hiss that becomes a cloud, a mist that rises like voices from another time. The heat is immediate. It enters your lungs, your bones, your bloodstream. But it is not pain. It is release. The lodge is held in 4 rounds, corresponding to the 4 directions. Each round is a journey into prayer, into memory, into letting go. During each round, the leader, often an elder or medicine person, offers chants, songs, and stories. Others may join in or remain silent. There is no script, only sincerity. One person prays for a child, another for clarity. Someone cries, someone laughs. Inside the lodge, there is no performance, only truth stripped bare by heat. And something shifts. Your sweat begins to pour not just from skin, but from sorrow, from stories that have lived in your muscles too long. The steam carries them up, off your body, into the circle, and the circle holds them. When the round ends, the door opens, and fresh air rushes in like grace. But no one speaks. The silence between rounds is part of the medicine. More stones are added, more water, more prayer, until you reach the final round and emerge, crawling back out, blinking at the sky, feeling the sun again as if for the first time. And in that moment, raw, bare, soaked in ash and sweat, you are not who you were. The Lakota say mitakuye oyasin, all my relations. It is not just a greeting. It is a worldview. A reminder that every stone, every tree, every tear belongs to the same breath. And through this ceremony, you have remembered your place in it. Even today, sweat lodge ceremonies are practiced across native nations Lakota, Navajo, Cherokee, Anishinaabe, and many more, each with its own variation songs, materials, meanings. But the heart remains the same: to return, to cleanse, to listen. Western science has studied the sweat lodge, measuring body temperature, detoxification, endorphin release. And while these things are true, they are not the point. The sweat lodge is not about what it does to your body. It is about what it allows you to let go of. Grief. Guilt. The illusion of separation. You do not sweat to be clean. You sweat to remember you were never unclean to begin with. Perhaps tonight, even without willow branches or sacred stones, you can close your eyes and feel that womb. Feel the steam. Feel your breath soften. And remember that to be born again is sometimes as simple as sitting in the dark and listening. It begins in silence. Not the absence of noise, but the kind of silence that hums with anticipation. You are standing at the edge of a sacred grove, somewhere outside the city walls of Athens. The moon hangs low and full, casting pale silver light over the soft earth. And around you, no men, only women. This is the Thesmophoria, one of the most mysterious and powerful festivals of the ancient Greek world, a multi-day ritual held exclusively by women to honor Demeter, goddess of the harvest, and her daughter Persephone, the lost queen of the underworld. Unlike the dramatic rites of Dionysus or the grand sacrifices of Zeus, Thesmophoria was private, quiet, and veiled in ritual secrecy. It was practiced in cities all across ancient Greece, but most famously in Athens. And though male writers rarely described it in detail, perhaps out of ignorance, perhaps by sacred design, what survives speaks of fertility, mourning, rebirth, and cosmic balance. The women would leave their homes, bringing with them offerings of grain, honey, cakes shaped like pigs, and white robes. They would sleep outdoors, often fasting, camping near the sacred sites reserved for the goddesses. There were no temples with marble columns, just earth, sky, and ritual objects passed down for generations. On the first day, known as Anodos Ascent, the women ascended the hillside, bringing with them symbols of life and death seeds, cakes, sacred pigs, and terracotta figures. Some sources suggest they retrieved the remains of pigs that had been thrown into underground chambers called Megara in previous years, allowed to decay, to rot, to become part of the earth only to be brought back up and mixed into the soil to bless the coming crops. It is, quite literally, a ritual of resurrection. On the second day, Nestaya, or fasting, the women sat in mourning. They refrained from food and physical pleasure, echoing Demeter's grief after Persephone was stolen by Hades. There were no loud lamentations, only quiet withdrawal. They sat on the ground, on mats made of plants associated with death like fennel and pennyroyal, to feel the loss in their bones, to remember the cyclical nature of sorrow and growth. This mourning was not performative. It was participatory. Each woman, through fasting and silence, entered into the myth not as an observer but as a vessel. Then, on the final day, Kaligeneia, or beautiful birth, they celebrated renewal. Offerings were made, ritual cakes were eaten, torches were lit, and songs were sung. Songs we will never know, because they were never written down. They were not meant for history. They were meant for goddesses. One of the most symbolic acts of Thesmophoria involved the sacred pigs. In some versions, live piglets were thrown into the Megara deep pits dug into the earth and left there to decay alongside pine cones, cakes, and grain. Months later, the priestesses would retrieve the decomposed remains, dry them, and mix them with seeds before the next planting season. It was a visceral reenactment of the agricultural cycle, death-feeding life. But beneath this agricultural symbolism was something even more radical, a sacred feminine space where women held power over fertility, birth, agriculture, and spiritual renewal. In a world dominated by patriarchal gods and public politics, Thesmophoria was a realm by women, for women, and about women. There were no spectators, no men allowed, even the most revered male philosophers and poets. Plato, Aristophanes, Sophocles could only speculate, satirize, or tiptoe around its mysteries. What makes Thesmophoria so haunting is not just its secrecy, but its emotional architecture. It was not just about the earth. It was about the body, the womb, the loss of a child, the ache of separation, the longing to return, and the joy, however tentative, of reunion. These women were not only praying for good harvests, they were remembering what it meant to create, to lose, and to heal. Even today, archaeologists uncover votive figurines, tiny terracotta statues of Demeter and Persephone, buried in the soil of former Thesmophoria sites. Their faces are worn, their hands still holding grain or torches, echoes of the thousands of women who once gathered in the night, offering milk, honey, and silence to the moon. And though the Thesmophoria faded with time as Christianity took root and ancient gods grew quiet, its spirit survives in the spaces where women still gather, still grieve, still dance under the stars. Maybe in some part of your body, you still carry this memory too, of gathering under moonlight, of fasting not to punish, but to honor, of lighting a torch not to see the path ahead, but to remember the path already walked. In the golden hush of ancient Thebes, beneath a desert sky as still as memory, a ritual unfolded that whispered of eternity. The opening of the mouth ceremony, central to ancient Egyptian funerary practice, was not just a rite, it was a delicate, reverent negotiation between death and continued existence. To the Egyptians, death wasn't an end but a passage, and this ritual was the key to ensuring that the deceased could speak, breathe, eat, and fully live again in the next world. The ritual, typically performed by a priest dressed as Anubis or the deceased's eldest son, involved touching the mouth and eyes of a mummy or a statue with ceremonial instruments like the adze and the pesishkef blade. These were not arbitrary tools, they mirrored instruments used in childbirth, suggesting a symbolic rebirth into the afterlife. With each gentle motion, the soul of the deceased was believed to be reborn, awakened from stillness, ready to journey into the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise. The ritual began in the embalming tent or tomb, where sacred words were intoned and incense filled the air. In some versions, a statue of the deceased stood in place of the body, its lips pressed open with ritual precision. The priest would call upon the gods, Ptah, Osiris, Horus, invoking their powers to endow the soul with the faculties of life once more. Each utterance, each movement, carried divine weight. The recitation from the Book of the Dead provided spiritual scaffolding, linking the body and its Ka life force, Ba personality, and Ak eternal light. The ceremony was not only physical, but profoundly symbolic. It evoked Ma'at, the principle of cosmic harmony. Only a soul aligned with Ma'at could continue its journey beyond. Thus, before the mouth was opened, the heart had to be judged. In some depictions, the ritual follows the famous weighing of the heart, in which the heart of the deceased was balanced against the feather of Ma'at. A heavy heart burdened by lies or cruelty would be devoured by Ammit, the crocodile-lion-hippopotamus hybrid, ending the soul's story forever. But if the heart was light and the mouth was opened properly, the soul could speak its own name before the gods, And in Egypt, to speak your name was to live. This is why names were so sacred, so carefully etched into tombs and monuments. In life and in death, voice meant being. The opening of the mouth gave you that voice, allowed you to eat the bread of eternity, to drink from the sacred lake, to rejoin your ancestors, and to see the light of Ra rising once more over the eastern horizon. Interestingly, archaeologists have discovered scenes of this ritual engraved on the walls of tombs from the Old Kingdom onward, including the tombs of Rekhmir and Tutankhamun. The precise language used in the ritual captured in pyramid texts and later coffin texts shifted subtly over time, but the intent remained unchanged to animate the spirit. In some depictions, the ceremony was carried out on a statue, suggesting that even an image could house a living presence, if honored properly. Scholars today still debate the full symbolic reach of the ceremony. Some see it as a dramatized myth of Osiris, who was slain and resurrected by his sister wife Isis with the help of their son Horus. Others suggest it mirrors the agricultural cycle, the body buried like a seed, the mouth opened like the bloom of grain after the floodwaters of the Nile recede. And so, as the priest touched the lips of the statue or mummy, in the flickering firelight of torches and the scent of myrrh, the veil between worlds grew thin. The dead, whose bodies had been embalmed with astonishing care, whose amulets and gold masks shimmered with the power of ancient magic, were reborn not in flesh, but in spirit. Through a ritual as quiet as breath and as ancient as longing, they became whole again. In our modern lens, we may be tempted to see such ceremonies as remnants of a bygone mythology, but to the Egyptians, these rites were a technology of the soul tested, refined, sacred. They held the wisdom of millennia, passed through priestly lineages, etched into stone, and echoed in the silence of tombs. Even now, when we see the golden face of Tutankhamun, or read the glyphs that spell his name, we are bearing witness to a voice that still speaks, long after the sands have swallowed the living. The opening of the mouth wasn't merely about ritual precision. It was about restoring humanity's voice across time. In that still room of incense and stars, a person once dead could speak again and be remembered. High in the Andes, where clouds drift low across jagged peaks and condors spiral like forgotten omens, there is a silence that hums with memory. Here, in stone-built villages nestled against snow-crowned ridges, time has bent differently. And in that slowness, the coca leaf speaks. You sit cross-legged on a woven mat. Before you is a small cloth, hand-dyed in sacred patterns, diamonds for the 4 cardinal directions, zigzags for the lightning gods. An old Quechua woman, her cheeks wine-chapped and eyes like obsidian, picks up a handful of coca leaves. They are not chewed today. They are messengers. This is kin to a ritual of coca leaf divination passed through countless generations of Andean priests and elders. It's not magic. It's memory, wind, and ancestral breath. A way to see the hidden logic in the chaos of life. A ritual born from altitude and intimacy. The coca leaf, or Erythroxylum coca, has been cultivated in the Andes for over 8,000 years. More than a plant, it was, and remains, an axis of survival, spirituality, and ceremony. It dulls hunger, eases breath at high altitudes, and most of all, connects the Runa person to the Pachamama Mother Earth. But not all coca leaves are equal. For divination, the leaves must be unbroken, vibrant green, and gathered in silence. As the ritual begins, the Paco, a spiritual specialist, not unlike a shaman, calls upon the Apus mountain spirits and Pachamama with soft Quechua chants. The wind listens, how the leaves fall, reading destiny from a whisper. The diviner selects 3 perfect leaves. This triad, known as Kintu, represents balance body, mind, and spirit, or sometimes past, present, and future. These 3 leaves are held together and blown upon gently, a breath offering to the mountain gods. Then the Paco drops them onto the sacred cloth. Their position, direction, curvature, and alignment speak to the one who knows how to see. A leaf that falls face down may signal obstacles. If its tip points north, it may indicate spiritual guidance from ancestors. If a leaf overlaps another, it might suggest a relationship entanglement. This is not superstition. It is an encoded language drawn from centuries of intuitive observation and cultural inheritance. Questions asked to the wind. People come to Coca diviners not for lottery numbers, but for decisions soaked in weight. Should I plant my crops this moon cycle? Should my daughter marry into the family in the valley below? Will the rain come early this year? Should I make peace with the cousin who wronged me? The divination is practical, ethical, and relational. It is not a solo journey, but one that sees a person within a woven fabric of family, nature, and cosmic balance. Some diviners say the coca leaves know the true question in the heart, even if words cannot reach it. So the ritual often begins in silence. The leaves fall. The Paco watches, and only then speaks. The wind as a co-diviner. Andean coca rituals are rarely performed indoors. The open air is essential. The wind becomes part of the reading. A sudden gust may be interpreted as Pachamama's impatience. A shift in cloud shape or a circling hawk could revise the interpretation entirely. Nature does not interrupt the ritual. It is the ritual. Coca and reciprocity. Aini in action. The most vital concept in Andean cosmology is Aini sacred reciprocity. Nothing is ever taken without giving. After each divination, an offering is made: a few drops of chicha fermented corn drink, a small bundle of flowers, or a sprinkle of ground maize. Sometimes, the leaves themselves are buried, returned to the earth with a prayer. This reciprocal act isn't symbolic. It's a contract, spiritual and ecological. The coca leaves have spoken on behalf of the earth. Now, the human must speak back with gratitude, suppression, and survival. During the Spanish conquest, coca rituals were labeled as witchcraft. Catholic missionaries banned their practice and destroyed countless ceremonial bundles. But coca, like the Andes themselves, proved resilient. Hidden in remote villages, passed from grandmother to granddaughter, the rituals endured, even in modern-day Peru and Bolivia. Despite coca's association with the global drug trade, its sacred status remains strong in indigenous communities. The divination continues, quietly, without spectacle, a private whisper between wind, leaf, and soul. What the coca leaves remind us. There is a humility in this ritual. The leaves do not promise certainty, only clarity. The diviner does not claim to see the future, but to help the seeker listen to the land, to intuition, to the thread that ties their story to the stories of mountains, storms, and soil. In a world obsessed with certainty, the Kintu offers a subtler gift: harmony with uncertainty. You do not control the wind, but you can listen to it. And perhaps, in that listening, find what you already knew but had forgotten. Closing the reading. When the ritual ends, the leaves are not discarded. They are gathered gently, blessed, and often tucked into a sacred bundle called a mesa, containing feathers, stones, shells, and other symbols of the seeker's life. This bundle is sometimes kept for years, fed with prayers and smoke. A portable shrine of memory. You rise from the mat. The wind has shifted. The mountains look the same. But something inside you has tilted. Not forward, not backward, just deeper. At sunrise, when the air in Bali still smells of wet stone and incense, women in bright sarongs can be seen walking barefoot toward the temple. Balanced atop their heads are offerings kanang sari, delicate palm leaf baskets brimming with flowers, rice, sandalwood, and sometimes a tiny candy or a cigarette. They walk slowly, as if their very breath is part of a prayer. Every movement, every scent, every color is a dialogue between humans and the invisible forces that shape the world. This is the daily ritual of Ngaturang Banten, the practice of giving offerings to the gods and spirits in Balinese Hinduism. It is at once simple and intricate, ephemeral and eternal. To a visitor, the tiny woven baskets may appear decorative, but to the Balinese, each one is a miniature cosmos, a micro-universe representing harmony between human beings, Manusia, nature Buana Agung, and the divine Dewa, offerings as the language of balance. Unlike in many other forms of Hinduism, where grand rituals may be centralized around fire or scripture, Balinese Hinduism places its emotional and symbolic heart in the offering. These gifts are not bribes to the gods, nor are they requests. They are a thank you, a recognition of the unseen energies at play, ancestors, deities, and spirits, and a reaffirmation of one's role in maintaining Arwa Binada, the sacred duality of life, good and evil, light and dark, joy and sorrow. A single offering may contain 5 flowers, each facing a different direction to symbolize the gods of the cardinal points. Frangipani for Shiva, red hibiscus for Brahma, white jasmine for Iswara. There is coconut for purity, rice for nourishment, betel leaves for life force. Even the act of placement left side of the shrine for male energy. Right for female encodes layers of cosmology, and when the basket is placed, incense is lit. The smoke rises like a silver thread between realms, believed to carry the spiritual essence of the offering upward. What remains the physical matter is not wasted. Animals might eat it, wind might scatter it. But this too is part of the cycle. Not just for the gods, offerings are placed not only in temples, but everywhere on motorbikes, shop counters, rice fields, intersections, even beaches. This is because the Balinese view spirits as residing in all places, not just the celestial, but also the chthonic, the demonic, the ancestral. Spirits live in trees and rivers, in rocks and corners, in yesterday's memory and tomorrow's dream. There are offerings to the benevolent gods Diwa, to neutral spirits Bhuta, and even to harmful ones Kalika, not to appease them in fear, but to acknowledge their place in the cosmic balance. A spilled cup of coffee in front of a threshold. That might not be trash. That might be a gift to the guardian of the door. This generous distribution of offerings echoes the Balinese philosophy of Trihita Karana, the 3 causes of well-being: harmony with God, harmony with other people, and harmony with nature. Ritual is not confined to sacred days. It is life itself. Sweeping a temple courtyard is an act of spiritual maintenance. Placing a banana in a woven tray is an act of philosophical affirmation. The dance in the temple courtyard. One of the most hypnotic moments in Balinese ritual is when offerings merge with dance, particularly during temple ceremonies known as Odalan, which celebrate the anniversary of a temple's founding. Here, dances such as legong or barong are performed not as art for humans, but as sacred invitations for the gods to inhabit the temple and commune with the community. In these performances, dancers become vessels. The swaying of their arms, the flicker of their eyes, the trembling of golden fans all are choreographed offerings in motion. The stage becomes a threshold between visible and invisible. The dance a language spoken between the mortal and the divine. The audience includes both humans and gods. Even the gamelan music that accompanies these dances is considered an offering. Its shimmering, cyclical rhythms played on bronze instruments tuned not to Western keys, but to cosmic resonance are meant to please deities as much as delight human ears. Fragility and permanence. What's striking is the fragility of these offerings. They decay in hours, crushed under sandals or caught in the rain. But this is part of their sacredness. As anthropologist Robert Wessing observed in a comparative study, Balinese offerings are beautifully doomed. Their impermanence is a reminder of the transitory nature of all things, a gentle lesson in letting go. Rather than being a flaw, this ephemerality is essential. The offerings are not meant to last, they are meant to flow. Each day brings a new moment of balance to maintain. Spirituality here is not a fixed dogma, but a continuous gesture. In many ways, this parallels the Balinese relationship with time. The island's sacred calendar. The Pawukon is not linear, but cyclical, with multiple overlapping time systems: lunar, solar, ancestral, that interact like a clock with shifting gears. Ritual is not about progress, but about returning, aligning, remembering. A ritual of the senses. To walk through a Balinese village at dusk, when offerings are being placed, is to experience a ritual of the senses. You smell the frangipani and sandalwood smoke. You hear the echo of gamelan from a distant courtyard. You see women bending gracefully, speaking soft mantras as they place baskets on thresholds and altars. You may even catch a child mimicking the movements of her mother, placing a tiny flower with all the seriousness of a priestess. The Balinese offering is not a moment, it is a rhythm. It is the way the island breathes. And when the ceremony is over, and the baskets have been taken by dogs or wind or time, something remains in the air. A trace of incense, a whisper of petals, a sense that for one more day, the balance has been held. In the frozen vastness of the Arctic, where snowdrifts become walls and silence can howl louder than a storm, a figure kneels by a seal oil lamp, eyes closed, breath slow. Around them, the air tightens. They are not alone anymore. The soul has begun its journey among the Inuit peoples of the Arctic across Canada, Greenland, and Alaska. The practice of shamanism has long served as a profound bridge between the physical world and the spirit realm. The shamans, known in Inuktitut as Angakuk, plural Angakuit, were not simply healers or spiritual guides. They were dreamwalkers, soul menders, and cosmic travelers, tasked with navigating the invisible geography of illness, misfortune, and ancestral memory. Through elaborate trance states, dream visions, and sometimes harrowing symbolic death and rebirth experiences, Inuit shamans undertook what is known anthropologically as a shamanic soul journey, a voyage through non-ordinary reality on behalf of the living. This journey was neither metaphorical nor allegorical. For the Inuit, the soul was real. Multiple souls. In fact, each human was thought to possess at least 2 or 3 different soul components, depending on regional variation, which could become displaced, trapped, or fragmented. And in such cases, only the Angakuk could retrieve them. The soul as breath, bone, and memory. Traditional Inuit cosmology is deeply animistic. Everything has a soul or spirit, from animals to rivers to the wind itself. Humans are no exception. In the Netsilik Inuit tradition, for example, a person has both a tarnek, often understood as a personal soul or shadow self, and a sila, a more impersonal breath-like essence, linked to the larger natural world. If the tarnek becomes frightened, shocked, or lured away by malevolent spirits, the result might be sickness, madness, or misfortune. In such moments, the Angakuk would be called upon to retrieve the lost soul, a practice that required deep trance work, intense symbolic confrontation, and the ability to navigate a spirit world filled with danger and wonder. Entering trance drums, silence, and the bones of the earth. The Inuit shamanic journey typically begins in solitude or a dim communal gathering, marked by rhythmic drumming or throat singing, intended not as performance but as a vehicle for disassociation. The Angakuk enters a trance state sometimes induced by breath work, fasting, or sensory deprivation, during which the soul is said to leave the body. In the trance, the Angakuk might encounter helping spirits, most often in the form of animals, a bear ancestor, a seal guardian, or a bird who offers safe passage across the blizzard-filled thresholds of the otherworld. Some spirits speak in riddles, while others guide with gestures, dreams, or sudden winds. Anthropologist Jean Briggs, who spent over a year living among the Utkuhi-Kalingmiut Inuit in the 1960s, documented the deeply social and moral landscape of Inuit spiritual life, noting that the shaman's role was always in service to balance not dominance, but harmony with forces both seen and unseen. Briggs, 1970. The Bone Game. Reassembling what was lost. One of the most poetic metaphors found in Inuit shamanic narratives is the concept of reassembling the bones. This echoes mythologies across the circumpolar world, where spiritual healing is imagined as a process of finding and rejoining the lost parts of the self. Much like a caribou skeleton must be reassembled to bring it back to life, sometimes the Angakuk must die symbolically in their vision, their body falling apart, their bones scattered only to be put back together by spirits, wiser and changed. This mirrors the classic shamanic initiation described by scholar Mircea Eliade in his seminal text Shamanism: Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy 1951, where the shaman's soul descends into the underworld, is dismembered, and is reborn with new power. In Inuit belief, this is not mere metaphor. The Angakuk returns changed. Sometimes they are silent for days. Sometimes they weep. The experience is ineffable, and its power is carried in the breath, in the bones, and in the gaze. Healing, hunting, and harmony. Unlike Western religious systems focused on worship or salvation, Inuit shamanism is deeply pragmatic. The soul journey has a purpose: to retrieve a lost child's soul, to ask forgiveness from a wronged spirit, to negotiate with the sea woman Sedna for successful hunting, Every action in the human world has consequences in the spirit world, and vice versa. For example, when a hunter breaks a taboo, perhaps taking too many fish or disrespecting an animal's remains, misfortune might follow. In such cases, the Angakuk journeys into the depths to plead with the offended spirits, offering symbolic compensation or sacred words to restore balance. In some regions, like the Baffin Island communities, it was believed that an Angakuk could transform into their helping spirit, becoming a bird or a seal in dream state, and witness the origins of a disease. This shape-shifting was not fantasy, but an ontological extension of identity, where human and animal, body and soul, world and spirit, existed on a continuum, the loss and echo of tradition. By the 20th century, colonialism, Christianity, and forced assimilation programs had severely damaged Inuit shamanic practice. Many Angakkuit were persecuted, their practices dismissed as superstition. The Canadian residential school system sought to erase Indigenous spirituality entirely, often violently, and yet memory lingers. In recent decades, Inuit communities have begun reviving ancestral practices, not to return to the past, but to heal the intergenerational wounds of cultural loss. Elders pass on stories of soul journeys. Young Inuit artists and writers explore the meaning of Tarnek and Sila in modern identity. Some even engage in guided trance work and drumming circles as part of personal or communal healing. The Angakuk may no longer wear the bone amulets of old, but their spirit walks still linger in the wind, in the drumbeat of a snow-covered world, and in the dreams of those who remember. Final image: a feather in the ice. Imagine a feather white, fine, trembling, caught in a drift of blue Arctic snow. That feather once belonged to a raven guide, who whispered truths to an Angakuk under the northern lights. That feather is not lost. It is waiting for someone to remember how to fly inward. In a quiet courtyard behind an aging ancestral hall in southern China, a woman lights 3 sticks of incense. She closes her eyes, bows 3 times, and murmurs a name not her own, not recent, but one carried through generations. The scent of burning sandalwood drifts upward, toward the heavens, or perhaps to a more intimate world, the waiting spirits of her ancestors. A small table is laid with symbolic offerings, bowls of rice, a whole chicken, oranges, tea, and wine. Next to them sits a sheet of red paper, folded carefully, inscribed with her ancestors' names in elegant calligraphy. And nearby, a bundle of spirit money joss paper awaits the flame. This quiet moment is part of one of the world's oldest, most enduring spiritual practices, the Chinese ancestral offering ritual. A complex web of reverence, reciprocity, and remembrance that weaves the living with the dead. A philosophy of the family, not just the soul. The Chinese ancestral ritual is not merely religious, it is philosophical, rooted in Confucianism, Taoism, and traditional folk beliefs. It views the soul not as a separate entity wandering into a spiritual afterlife, but as an extension of familial continuity. As explained in the Analects of Confucius, filial piety, xiao xiao, is the core virtue upon which society rests. Respecting and caring for one's parents doesn't end with their death. It deepens. The dead are not gone. They become ancestors who continue to shape the lives of the living. In this worldview, the family is an ongoing relationship between the living and the dead. Ancestors dwell in a subtle realm and influence prosperity, health, and harmony. If honored properly, they bring blessings. If neglected, They may become wandering spirits, lonely, forgotten, and perhaps even resentful. The structure of the offering. The ritual can be as intimate as a bowl of rice and incense before a small household shrine, or as elaborate as full-scale festivals involving processions, feasts, and opera performances. But even in its simplest form, the elements of the ritual carry deep symbolism. The altar, usually placed in the most respected part of the home, often facing south. The ancestral altar holds spirit tablets engraved with the names of deceased family members. These tablets are considered the spiritual embodiment of the ancestor. Some households maintain a lineage hall, where extended family gathers for communal rituals, incense and offerings. Burning. Incense is more than symbolic. It is believed to open a channel between the worlds. The fragrant smoke serves as a bridge. Offerings include fruits symbolizing harmony, meats representing respect and abundance, wine for celebration, and rice or dumplings nourishment. All offerings are presented in odd numbers, especially threes reflecting harmony in traditional cosmology. Joss paper spirit money. Special sheets of paper, often made to resemble gold or silver currency, are burned as a gift to ancestors, ensuring they are wealthy in the afterlife. Modern adaptations include burning paper replicas of cell phones, cars, or even houses, bowing and prayers. The ritual often includes 3 deep bows, kowtows, and whispered words, greetings, wishes, even casual updates from life. It is a time not only of respect, but of intimate communion. Qingming and Ghost Month, public memory ritualized. The Chinese calendar offers 2 major occasions where ancestral offerings reach public, national scale. Qingming Festival, Qingming Jai, or Tomb Sweeping Day, usually in early April, is the most important. Families visit graves, clean them, offer food, and burn incense and joss paper. It is a time to reconnect with roots and recognize the cycles of life and death. Zhongyuan Festival, Zhongyuanji, or Ghost Festival, held on the 15th day of the 7th lunar month, is based more in Taoist and Buddhist cosmology. During this time, it is believed that the gates of the underworld open, allowing the spirits of the dead to return. People make offerings to appease wandering souls who have no descendants to remember them, a communal act of empathy and protection. These rituals serve not only religious and emotional functions, but also social ones, maintaining family bonds, reinforcing lineage identity, and cultivating a cultural memory that spans centuries. The red thread of cultural survival. Despite periods of suppression, especially during China's Cultural Revolution, ancestral rites have quietly persisted. In rural areas, they were performed in secret. Today, in a revival of traditional culture, they are returning openly, practiced by younger generations rediscovering their heritage. In Taiwan, the rituals were never interrupted and remain part of everyday life. In diasporic Chinese communities from Singapore to San Francisco, the rituals have adapted. Digital ancestor altars now allow families to light incense virtually. Joss paper is purchased online, yet the red thread remains memory, gratitude, and presence. As scholar Mu Cho-pu of the Chinese University of Hong Kong noted, ancestral offerings are not about death. They are about life's continuity. To perform a ritual, he writes, is not to honor a memory, but to renew a relationship. The whisper in the smoke. What makes the Chinese ancestral offering ritual so enduring is its simplicity and intimacy. You do not need a priest or a temple. You need presence, a bowl of rice, a stick of incense, a name remembered, a whisper into smoke. In an age where identity feels fragmented and history often slips from memory, this ritual offers a quiet clarity. You are part of something older than you, and your life ripples outward to those who came before and those yet to come, in the soft crackle of joss paper, in the warm light of a burning incense stick. There is no fear of death. There is only recognition that life is a red thread stretching endlessly across time, woven through spirit and blood and breath. In a courtyard bathed in the soft morning sun of southwestern Nigeria, the voice of the elder rings out, low and rhythmic. A baby lies cradled in white cloth, eyes shut, chest gently rising and falling. Before the child are laid symbolic objects: water in a calabash, kola nuts, salt, palm oil, and a small blade. Around them, family members gather, some in ceremonial robes, some in quiet reverence. This is the Yoruba naming ritual, known as the komole, an ancient and profound rite where a newborn is ushered into the world not just with a name, but with an identity, a destiny, and a spiritual lineage. Unlike the sterile certificates of modern birth registration, this ritual treats naming as an act of cosmological alignment. Among the Yoruba, to name a child is to place them in the fabric of history, spirit, and purpose. Names are never arbitrary. They are tools. They are maps. They are prayers disguised as syllables. The cosmology behind the name for the Yoruba people. Life is not accidental. Each person is believed to come into the world with a spiritual blueprint, a divine plan called Akunleyan, chosen by the soul before birth in consultation with the Creator Olodumare. When a child is born, it is believed that the newborn carries clues to this celestial choice. Hence, naming is not just a familial act, but a sacred decoding of the soul's intent. This explains the intense deliberation that surrounds Yoruba names. Some are given based on the circumstances of birth. A child born after twins is often named Idowu, seen as a spiritual buffer. A child born during hardship may be called Abiodun, born during the festival. Others reference lineage, deities, or virtues. In all cases, names are spoken with an understanding that words shape reality. 8 days to the world. The ritual typically takes place on the 8th day after birth. This 8-day period allows the infant to be gently observed, their dreams, their behaviors. Even the illnesses or signs they might manifest are watched carefully. These observations help spiritual elders interpret omens and select names that align with the child's perceived destiny. On the day of the ceremony, a babalawo, a traditional priest of Ifa divination, may be called Runmila, the deity of wisdom and destiny. The oracle might reveal spiritual connections, ancestral debts, or divine instructions, all of which influence the naming. The ceremony, symbolism, and steps. The scene is intimate, yet layered with centuries of meaning. Elders and family members take turns placing drops of water, palm oil, and honey on the infant's lips while chanting blessings. Each substance holds symbolic power. Water represents truth. It is tasteless and transparent, reminding the child to be honest and pure. Honey signifies sweetness and joy, wishes for a pleasant life. Palm oil is a spiritual lubricant, easing the path through life's challenges. Kola nut is an offering to the spirits and a gesture of welcome. Salt preserves and purifies, warding off corruption. Pepper is a reminder of life's inevitable spice and occasional pain. In some communities, A small symbolic cut is made either on the wrist or chest using a sterilized blade. This is not done to hurt, but to initiate the child into the circle of ancestral memory. It symbolizes that life carries both joy and pain, but also continuity. The blade whispers, "You are not alone in this world. Others walked before you." After the symbolic tastings and gestures, the names are finally pronounced. Not just one name, but often 7 or more. Each relative may offer a name: maternal grandparents, paternal uncles, or close community elders. The parents' chosen names carry the most weight, but every name is held with honor. They serve different purposes. One might be for spiritual protection, another for social identity, another a praise name meant to be sung during festivals. These names are not just spoken, they are declared with ritual gravity, as if each syllable pins the soul to its rightful place on earth. Language as power. The Yoruba language is tonal, meaning that even a slight variation in pitch can change the entire meaning of a word. This makes the act of naming especially delicate. A mispronunciation can transform Ayo joy into Ayo, a different concept entirely. This is why naming ceremonies are often accompanied by chants and songs, a way of embedding correct pronunciation into collective memory. Naming is also performative. Elders may call out the name 3 times, increasing in volume with each repetition. The repetition echoes through the courtyard like a call to existence, a sonic confirmation that the child is now among the living. Gender, family, and social bonds. The Yoruba naming ritual reinforces intergenerational ties. It binds the newborn to ancestors, both remembered and forgotten. Many names begin with Baba father, Ya mother, or Omo child, creating linguistic links across time. Even the selection of who may name the child reflects a balance of matrilineal and patrilineal honor, a social choreography of respect and memory. In many cases, the name connects the child to a specific orisa, or deity, from the Yoruba pantheon. A girl named Oluwaseun, God has done something good, may be seen as a gift from the heavens, while a boy named Ifayami, Ifa befits me, is thought to have spiritual gifts. These names are not private. They are sung in lullabies, chanted during illness, and invoked in prayers. They follow the child through life's thresholds: initiation, marriage, death. They are portable shrines, carried in the body, resilience and modernity. Today, Yoruba families across the diaspora from Brazil to Trinidad to the United States continue the tradition, adapting it to urban settings. Some ceremonies are held in small apartments, with live streams for relatives overseas. Others blend Christian or Muslim elements with traditional rites. Yet even in modernity, the core idea remains untouched: that to name a child is to recognize their sacredness, to encircle them with meaning, and to whisper into their tiny ears that they are not just here to survive, they are here to live on purpose. When a Yoruba child hears their full name sung during festivals, they do not just hear sounds. They hear ancestors. They hear stories. They hear destiny calling. There is a moment, brief but infinite, when a body begins to spin and time forgets how to measure. Sand softens under bare feet. The breath slows, then disappears. And then, like a feather turning in still air, the soul begins its ascent. This is not dance. It is devotion in motion. This is Sama, the sacred whirling of the Sufis. Sama is not meant to be watched. It is meant to be entered. It is not performance. It is a pathway, an echo of the soul's long journey back to its origin. and the whirling dervish, clothed in white like a shroud, arms extended with one palm facing upward and one downward, becomes the bridge between heaven and earth. A spinning prayer in human form, the origins of the whirl Sufi Sama finds its deepest and most poetic expression in the Mevlevi order, founded in the 13th century in Konya, present-day Turkey. Its spiritual father is Jalal al-Din Ruma, the Persian mystic poet whose verses ripple across centuries like water. After the death of his friend and teacher Shamsi Tabrizi, an event that shattered his heart, Rumi began to spin. According to oral tradition, it was not premeditated. His body, overcome by grief and longing, turned in the streets, arms outstretched. What emerged was more than mourning. It was mystical remembrance. The Mevlevi order systematized the practice of Sama into a structured, multi-layered ritual, which includes music, poetry, and circular movement. But at its core, Sama remains what Rumi meant it to be: dhikr, or remembrance of the divine, the ritual. Step by step, a Sama ceremony typically unfolds in a space known as the Semahan, a circular or octagonal chamber representing the universe. The dervishes, always an odd number in traditional practice, wear long white robes symbolizing burial shrouds, black cloaks symbolizing the grave, and tall felt hats symbolizing tombstones. Each gesture, each piece of clothing, is symbolic. Nothing is arbitrary. The ritual begins with Nat, a poetic eulogy to the Prophet Muhammad, often composed by Rumi. Then follows Taksim, an improvisational piece played on the ney reed flute, representing the breath of God giving life to creation. As the ney weeps, the dervishes slowly rise and bow to one another not as humans, but as manifestations of the divine. Then, the whirling begins. The black cloak is removed, signaling spiritual rebirth, with the right palm lifted to the sky to receive divine grace, and the left palm facing the earth to transmit it. The dervish spins counterclockwise around his heart. The feet step in a slow rhythm, left foot rooted, right foot crossing, around and around. Each turn a letting go, each spin a dissolving. The ceremony unfolds in 4 salams, greetings or stages, representing the journey of the soul, awakening to divine truth, witnessing the grandeur of creation, annihilation of the ego fauna, return to society to serve with compassion. The circle closes with Quranic recitation and a prayer for peace. Spiritual significance to the untrained eye. Sama may seem hypnotic or theatrical, but to the dervish, it is the climax of inner purification. According to Mevlevi teachings, Sama is not a means to entertain or even to attain ecstasy. It is a way of burning the self, the ego, the illusion of separateness until only divine love remains. As the renowned 20th century Turkish Sufi Sheikh Suleiman Dede explained, "We turn to become empty. The world is heavy with itself. When we turn, we become like a drop flung back into the ocean." The act of turning is also deeply cosmic. The planets spin, galaxies rotate, electrons whirl. The dervish becomes one with the choreography of the universe, a mirror to its divine design. The music of heaven. Sama is inseparable from music. The ney, an ancient reed flute, plays a central role, hollow and mournful. Its sound is said to be the soul crying for reunion. The ensemble also includes the kudum small drums, ribab bowed string instrument, and choral voices chanting Ilahi's hymns of longing. But the music is not for the audience. It is for the divine, and it is often improvised. echoing the belief that true inspiration comes from God, not from rehearsal. This musical form is considered a kind of spiritual therapy in Sufism. The 11th century Persian philosopher Al-Ghazali wrote that music can awaken the soul's hidden memories of its divine origin. The melodies become a ladder, rung by rung, to the beloved, the survival of Sama. In 1925, under the secularizing reforms of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, all Sufi orders were banned in Turkey. Sama was prohibited. For decades, it survived underground, passed from heart to heart. Only in 1954 was the practice revived, carefully framed as a cultural heritage rather than religious ritual. Today, it is protected as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity by UNESCO. But scholars and dervishes alike warn of the danger of aestheticization when a sacred act becomes a tourist show. Yet in quiet corners of the world, in Istanbul tea houses, Moroccan zawiyas, Iranian tombs, and even urban circles in New York and Jakarta, Sama still lives, not as performance, as prayer, a circle without end. To witness a Sama ceremony is to step into a circle of forgetting and remembering. The outer world dissolves, time folds, and at the center, there is only this love turning upon itself. Rumi once wrote, "Why do you stay in prison when the door is so wide open?" The dervish spins to open that door, not with a key, but with surrender. And the sand remembers every step. In the stillness of the Himalayas, monks dressed in flowing crimson robes bend over a low wooden table. Their hands steady as moonlight move across colored sand with thin metal funnels called Chaac. A single breath can scatter weeks of their labor, yet they exhale softly, peacefully, in rhythmic pulses. This is not just art. This is a prayer. This is impermanence. Sculpted in colored dust, the Tibetan sand mandala is among the most intricate and ephemeral rituals practiced in Tibetan Buddhism. Known in Sanskrit as mandala, meaning circle, it is a geometric diagram symbolizing the universe. But to truly understand the power of this ritual, one must start not with its creation, but its destruction by the philosophy of impermanence. In Tibetan Buddhism, all phenomena are understood to be impermanent, anicca in Pali, anitya in Sanskrit. Nothing, not even the most exquisite beauty, is meant to last. The mandala is perhaps the most poetic embodiment of this truth. It is made only to be destroyed. The process of destruction is not an act of loss or sadness. It is a joyful and liberating gesture, a reminder that attachment leads to suffering. As the Dalai Lama once said, "We are visitors on this planet. We are here for 90 or 100 years at the very most. During that period, we must try to do something good, something useful with our lives. If you contribute to other people's happiness, you will find the true goal, the true meaning of life." And so, the destruction of the mandala is not a tragedy. It is a teaching. 2. Days of silence, grains of color. Before the mandala is destroyed, it must first be born. The process begins with a sacred space, usually inside a monastery or temple, which is ritually purified with chanting, incense, and prayer. Monks then draw geometric outlines on a wooden platform using chalked strings stretched across the surface, defining the cosmological structure of the mandala. Each line represents a deeper layer of the cosmos, 4 gates of direction, the palace of deities, lotus petals, rings of fire, and the protective outer circle. Once the layout is complete, colored sand, crushed marble, dyed with vibrant pigments, is carefully funneled through Chaac. These are small conical tools with a ridged surface that, when scraped with another stick, vibrate gently to release the sand one grain at a time. The sound it makes is a kind of spiritual hum, an audible reminder that creation requires patience, stillness, and breath. Depending on the size and complexity, a mandala may take anywhere from several days to several weeks to complete. During this time, monks keep vows of silence, working in meditative stillness. Third, the role of the deities. Each mandala corresponds to a particular deity and is often created as part of a tantric initiation or ritual. For example, the Kalachakra mandala represents the wheel of time and contains 722 deities rendered in vivid symbolic form. But the mandala is not a literal map, it is a spiritual one. According to Tibetan cosmology, the mandala is a residence of enlightened beings. Its center holds the deity, surrounded by retinues of lesser figures, all enclosed within concentric circles representing wisdom, compassion, and protection. When monks create the mandala, they are not merely drawing, they are inviting. Each grain of sand is a mantra, a syllable of devotion, a call to the divine. The moment of unmaking. After days or weeks of work, the completed mandala is displayed for a short time. Then comes the most moving part, the dismantling. The head monk begins the destruction by drawing a blade, usually a metal rod, across the mandala, sweeping inward from the outer edges to the center in a spiral motion. The once infinite patterns dissolve into colorless dust. This ritual act symbolizes the impermanence of all compounded things. Monks then sweep the sand into a pile, chanting prayers of compassion and release. It is not sadness they sing, it is freedom. A portion of the sand is distributed to those present as a blessing. The rest is poured into a body of water, often a river, so that the blessings of the ritual may flow outward, carried on the currents to benefit all beings. Mandala in the West. In recent decades, Tibetan monks, especially from the Drepung Loseling Monastery, have traveled worldwide to share this sacred art. Audiences from London to Los Angeles have watched in awe as intricate mandalas are created, only to be swept away. These public rituals have sparked both wonder and reflection. In a world obsessed with permanence and legacy, the sand mandala offers a radical message. Let go. Beauty does not have to last to be real. Meaning does not require monument. Western viewers have often misread the ritual as tragic, but Tibetan monks gently correct this. It is not the loss of art, it is the liberation from illusion. A teaching in silence. No matter how many times one witnesses a mandala's destruction, it still stirs something deep. Perhaps it reminds us of childhood sandcastles, washed away by tide, or the wrinkles on our grandparents' faces, or the moments we tried to hold on to love too tightly. The mandala teaches through silence. It tells us you are not your work. You are not your possessions. You are the act of creating, and the willingness to let go. To see a mandala is to see the universe in a grain of sand. To let it go is to join the dance of all things, spinning and dissolving in perfect harmony. In a quiet hall made of whitewashed stone and silence, a flame has been burning for over 1,000 years. It flickers softly inside a large brass urn, protected by thick glass, constantly fed with sandalwood and reverence. A white-robed priest steps forward, his face covered by a cloth pad, not to protect himself from the flame, but to protect the sacred fire from the impurity of his breath. He moves slowly, deliberately, as though time flows differently here. This is not just fire. This is Atar, the ever-living witness of truth, and the oldest living ritual of one of the world's oldest religions, Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrian fire rituals are not theatrical spectacles of roaring flames and dance, but precise, deeply symbolic acts of devotion. They represent an intimate dialogue between human discipline and divine order. This is the story of fire as ancestor, as judge, as divine bridge, a sacred ritual that places your hands not just near the flame, but into the core of human belief about purity, cosmic balance, and the endurance of good, an ancient flame that refuses to die. Zoroastrianism, one of the world's first monotheistic religions, emerged in ancient Persia around the 2nd millennium BCE, attributed to the prophet Zarathustra, also known as Zoroaster. The faith's central message was startlingly modern. The universe is a battleground between truth Asha and falsehood Druj, and each person has a role to play in maintaining the cosmic order through good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. In this moral landscape, fire Atar became more than an element. It was the physical manifestation of Asha, the eternal flame of truth. To protect and honor it became a sacred duty. Fire temples Atash Behram, Adaran, or Dadga, depending on the grade of sanctity, were built to house these eternal fires. The highest grade fire, an Atash Behram, takes years to consecrate. Its flame is created by ritually purifying fires from 16 different sources, including the hearth of a potter, the fire from a soldier's camp, and even lightning, each representing different aspects of society and existence. This blending reflects a Zoroastrian belief that the entire world must be unified and purified for cosmic order to endure. Once lit, these fires are never allowed to die. In Yazd, Iran, one such flame has been burning continuously for over 1,500 years, tended by generations of priests with absolute dedication. The ritual of service, standing before the flame. Each day, the Zoroastrian priest known as a Mobd begins the fire service in white robes Sudre and Kusti, a symbol of ritual purity. He wraps a cloth over his mouth, not out of fear, but reverence, ensuring that no breath of uncleanliness touches the sacred flame. This act of covering the mouth is known as the Paiti Dana. Before stepping into the inner sanctum, he undergoes an elaborate purification washing of the hands and face, wearing freshly laundered garments, reciting prayers to align thought and action. Entering the chamber is like stepping across the border between material life and sacred time. The Mobd tends the fire by adding fragrant sandalwood, using tongs. Each movement is part of a carefully choreographed ritual, accompanied by the recitation of the Atash Nyayesh, a litany of praise for the fire. There are no interruptions, no casual words, only a silence filled with ancient syllables. The flame is not just to be preserved, but served as one would serve a revered guest or divine royalty. Fire as witness, fire as purifier. To Zoroastrians, the flame is a silent witness of all moral action. Marriages are performed before it. Oaths are sworn by its light. Even the dead are remembered in its warmth. Unlike some religious traditions where fire is destructive or punitive, in Zoroastrianism, fire is healing not because it burns, but because it illuminates. It burns away falsehood, not with violence, but clarity. In fact, the fire itself is never worshipped. Zoroastrians are quick to clarify this. They do not worship fire, but through fire, they worship Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord, the divine creator. Fire is seen as the purest element through which spiritual truth can be perceived. It is a medium, a lens, not the deity itself. This aligns with the religion's emphasis on ethical monotheism. The flame is a call to live truthfully, to act with integrity. To be seen by the flame is to be reminded of one's accountability in the grand drama of truth versus falsehood, ritual, and the sacred geometry of order. The structure of fire rituals in Zoroastrianism is not arbitrary. Every detail, from the number of steps taken to the direction one faces, is symbolic. The temple is divided into zones of increasing purity, with the innermost chamber, the Atashka, being the most sacred. Only the highest-ranking priests may enter. The preparation of fire itself involves Bareshnam purification rituals, which are among the most complex in world religions, involving 9 days of isolation, ritual washing with sacred bull's urine nirang, and daily prayers. This is not just hygiene, it's a metaphysical cleansing, affirming the eternal battle between order and chaos. Interestingly, the fire rituals do not include music or dancing. Instead, the rhythm comes from prayer cycles, the rustle of movement, and the whispering crackle of the fire. In their silence lies their power, a ritual endangered but not forgotten. With the diaspora of Zoroastrians, especially the Parsis in India and Iran's shrinking community, fire temples have become rare sanctuaries. In India, the Iransha Atash Behram in Udvada has been continuously burning for over 200 years, maintained by generations of priests with painstaking devotion. Women and men of the faith visit the temple, bow gently, and pray in silence. Even those who don't enter the sanctum feel the presence of the flame, a symbolic continuation of the light that has guided their ancestors for millennia. In modern times, Zoroastrians have made efforts to preserve their rituals, digitize sacred texts, and open fire temples like the one in Houston, Texas, to serve diasporic communities. Yet the rituals remain unchanged, a stubborn thread of ancient fire that refuses to go out. When the flame looks back, what does it mean to stand before a fire that has burned since before your ancestors spoke your name? To some, it is only a symbolic gesture. But to Zoroastrians, the flame sees. It remembers. It holds you in its light, not to judge, but to reflect what is already within. You are not merely warming your hands here. You are participating in an unbroken ritual that began before the pyramids fell, before empires dissolved. You are aligning yourself with the cosmos, one log, one prayer, one silent bow at a time. In the quiet breath before the fire, everything is still. And in that stillness, the flame speaks not with words, but with presence. Not just heat, not just light, but truth. Every 52 years, the sky above ancient Tenochtitlan held its breath. The stars, those glittering messengers of fate, hovered in patterns too sacred to ignore. The Aztecs, living at the heart of the Mexico world, believed that time itself ran on a divine loop. And every 52 years, that loop threatened to end. This wasn't superstition. It was cosmological anxiety woven into the daily rhythm of life. To the Aztecs, time was not infinite, but borrowed. The gods had once sacrificed themselves to set the sun in motion. And if mortals failed to repay that gift, the sun might never rise again. The universe, as they knew it, could collapse into eternal night. And so, they prepared. The new fire ceremony, or Toxiumulpilia, meaning binding of the years, was not just a ritual, it was a collective gamble with the cosmos, a calendar built on fear and precision. The Aztecs used two main calendars, the Tanalpahuali, a 260-day ritual cycle, and the Xiupahuali, a 365-day solar calendar. Every 52 years, these two would align, creating a sacred convergence. But this alignment was no cause for celebration, quite the opposite. It marked a dangerous liminal period, when the gods might decide that humanity's time had come to an end. For years in advance, the Aztecs watched the skies. Priests kept careful accounts of astronomical events, especially the motion of the Pleiades constellation. When it reached its zenith at midnight, it was said the world might either continue or perish. The stakes could not be higher. A world extinguished before renewal. As the fateful date approached, the empire slowed to a crawl. Fires across the entire Mexico world were extinguished, every hearth, every temple flame. Cooking ceased. Homes went cold. Pregnant women were locked away to protect unborn children from bad omens. Old pottery was destroyed. Statues were decapitated. Nothing from the old cycle could cross into the new. This symbolic death of the world was terrifying, but necessary. In the capital and surrounding city-states, silence fell. Even the birds seemed to hush. The people of Tenochtitlan stared upward, wondering if the sun would bother to return. The hill of the star and the heart of the cosmos, high on Huixactlan, the hill of the star, modern-day Cerro de la Estrella. The priesthood gathered. This was the ritual center of the new fire ceremony. A prisoner, often a brave and honored warrior, was prepared. His chest was painted black, his body ritually cleansed. He was about to play the most terrifying and sacred role imaginable, a sacrifice that could save the universe. At the exact moment when the Pleiades reached their zenith, a flint knife descended into his chest. If the fire ignited successfully in his chest cavity, it was a sign the world had been spared. Priests used a fire drill to light the flames within his opened body, transforming human sacrifice into cosmic ignition. If the fire failed to light, it would mean doom for all, lighting the cosmos anew. But when the flame caught, when that first fragile light danced in the darkness, cries of joy erupted across the hilltop. Priests rushed to transfer the flame onto torches, running them down the mountain to waiting messengers. From there, fires were relit across the empire. Homes, temples, and cities burst into flame, not in destruction, but in renewal. The world, it seemed, had been reborn. People pierced their ears, tongues, and thighs in gratitude, offering their own blood to honor the gods who had granted them another cycle of life. Dances began. Feasts returned. Music rose into the newly lit sky. Blood as cosmic currency. The Aztecs have often been misunderstood as bloodthirsty, but for them, blood wasn't violence, it was energy. To them, the gods had sacrificed themselves in the beginning of time to animate the sun. Without reciprocal offerings, the sun's journey would halt. Human sacrifice was not merely cultural, it was existential. The new fire ceremony reflected this belief with haunting clarity. Blood was the kindling, and fire was the gift of continued existence. It is uncomfortable, yes, but it was a worldview rooted in deep philosophical and theological ideas about debt, exchange, and cosmic responsibility, not just the Aztecs. Interestingly, the Aztec practice of calendrical renewal and sacred fire wasn't entirely unique. It echoed older traditions from earlier Mesoamerican civilizations such as the Zapotecs and Mixtecs. Even the Maya, whose long count calendar has fascinated modern minds, had rituals centered on cosmic resets and the role of fire in regeneration. But it was the Aztecs who crystallized these ideas into something grand, terrifying, and breathtakingly poetic. Collapse and memory. The last new fire ceremony is believed to have taken place in 1507, just over a decade before the Spanish conquistadors arrived and brought the Aztec Empire to a violent end. There would be no new fire ceremony in 1559, but the memory endured. Archaeological excavations at Cerro de la Estrella have uncovered altars, ceremonial platforms, and offering caches. Codices such as the Codex Borbonicus and Codex Mendoza preserve visual records of the rite. Today, in modern Mexico, fragments of the ritual remain in cultural memory dances, stories, and reenactments that speak to a time when fire was the boundary between existence and oblivion. Why it still matters at its heart. The new fire ceremony is a meditation on uncertainty. It asks a question most civilizations avoid. What if everything stops? What if tomorrow does not come? Rather than ignore this fear, the Aztecs built a magnificent ritual around it, one that gave people a way to look into the abyss and still offer light. In a modern world where existential threats loom, climate crisis, war, and technological disruption, we might find strange wisdom in this ancient fire ritual. When the darkness grows too thick, light must begin again, and sometimes that light must be kindled from within the chest of our own fear. Imagine you are alone in a canoe, adrift in a vast ocean that stretches endlessly in all directions. No compass, no maps, no instruments, just stars above, waves below, and the silence of thousands of years. Yet you are not lost. You are guided not by tools, but by rituals passed down through chants, dreams, and the rhythms of the sea. This is the world of Polynesian wayfinding, an extraordinary tradition that is not merely a technique of oceanic navigation, but a deeply sacred ritual that binds earth, sky, and spirit. The ocean as sacred space for Polynesians, especially the Maori of Aotearoa, New Zealand, the Hawaiians, and the people of the Society Islands, Micronesia, and Samoa. The ocean was not a void, but a pathway of ancestry and reverence. In their worldview, the ocean was a living being, and traversing it was an act of spiritual communion. Journeys across the sea were never simply about reaching new land. They were about reaffirming the ancient relationship between humanity and cosmos. The first act of any voyage was a ritual of intent. Before departure, navigators known as wayfinders or taumutu would chant to the spirits of the sea and sky. These chants weren't performative. They were part of the navigational memory itself. Embedded in their rhythms were the names of star paths, the behaviors of birds, and the way the waves whispered when land was near. The chants served as living maps. Ceremonial offerings were made to Tangaroa, the Polynesian god of the sea, and sometimes to ancestral spirits. Shell necklaces or sacred stones, called koru, were placed in the water to ensure safe passage. In some traditions, a single drop of blood was offered to bind the spirit of the navigator to the sea, signaling respect and humility in the face of the ocean's unknowable power. Stars, swells, and silence, the ritual of remembering to Western eyes. Polynesian navigation might seem like sorcery. No sextant, no GPS, just stars and sensation. But to the Polynesians, the navigator was a vessel of ancient knowledge, trained for decades in the ritual of attention. The process began in youth. A young apprentice would spend hours lying on the sand, staring at the night sky until the positions of the stars became muscle memory. The sky dome was divided into houses, and stars were grouped by their rising and setting points on the horizon. This memorized celestial map became the foundation of all orientation at sea. But the most mystical part came not from the sky but the sea itself. Polynesian wayfinders could read swells like scripture. Waves traveling across thousands of miles refract off islands and converge in ways only perceptible to those trained to feel them. Navigators would sit cross-legged in the center of the canoe, eyes closed, using the bones of their hips and spine to detect the pattern of swell directions. This body listening was not metaphorical. It was literal. To feel the ocean correctly, silence was required. Hours, sometimes days of quiet concentration. Some wayfinders describe entering a trance-like state where their body became the canoe, and the canoe became the ocean. There, intuition meets tradition. Time dissolves. Stars blur into sensation. Navigation becomes prayer. The role of the PWO ceremony. In Micronesia, particularly among the Caroline Islands, including Satawal, master navigators hold a powerful spiritual title, PWO. Becoming a PWO navigator is not just about skill, it's a sacred transformation akin to priesthood. The initiation ritual of PWO is one of the most secretive and revered in Polynesian culture. Candidates undergo years of training under a master navigator, learning the star compass, swell charts, and wind behaviors. But the PWO ceremony goes deeper. It involves fasting, isolation, and symbolic death. The initiate must die to the ordinary world and be reborn with the ocean inside them. In 2007, one of the few publicly witnessed PWO ceremonies in decades was held on the island of Satawal, initiated by the legendary navigator Maupiailug. He trained the Hawaiians who revived traditional voyaging in the late 20th century. His PWO ritual emphasized spiritual resilience and humility qualities, seen as essential for those entrusted with guiding others across dangerous waters, using only ancestral memory. Canoes as sacred beings. In these cultures, the canoe waka in Maori, wa in Hawaiian, is not a machine. It is a living ancestor. Canoes are given names, blessed before construction, and fed offerings before their maiden voyage. During sea journeys, specific chants are recited to awaken the canoe's spirit and align it with the forces of nature. In Hawaii, rituals involve placing a sacred tai leaf on the prow, believed to carry protective mana spiritual energy. When the Polynesian Voyaging Society launched Hokulea in the 1970s, a replica double-hulled canoe based on ancient designs, the voyage was not just technological revival, but spiritual rebirth. Its journeys, which included sailing around the world without modern instruments, were accompanied by rituals, chants, and ceremonies at every port. In Tahiti, locals wept as they welcomed the canoe, believing a piece of their past had returned home. Dream navigation and ancestral guidance. Some Polynesian navigators believe that dreams are part of the navigational system. Before major voyages, they enter meditative states or seek dreams where ancestors appear to offer insight. There are stories of navigators who changed their course mid-ocean because a vision told them to and found land where none was expected. This isn't mysticism in the modern derogatory sense, it's a different way of holding truth. In these cultures, dreams are not imagined, they are messages. Navigators are trained to interpret them with the same seriousness as they interpret wind direction or cloud formations. Such practices mirror the widespread indigenous understanding of deep time, where the past and future are always accessible through ritual attention. In this worldview, navigation is not about going somewhere. It's about remembering where you come from, revival, and the echoes of ancients. By the early 20th century, Colonization and missionary activity had almost erased Polynesian wayfinding. European maps and tools were enforced, and ancient rituals were labeled pagan or superstitious. Many master navigators died without passing on their knowledge. But in the 1970s, a cultural renaissance emerged, inspired by oral history and the teachings of Maupiailug. Polynesian scholars, seafarers, and spiritual leaders began reconstructing the rituals. The result was the birth of modern wayfinding canoes like Hokulea, Te Orere New Zealand, and Fafayit Tahiti, sailing once again across the vast Pacific using ancestral methods. Today, voyaging societies across the Pacific hold sacred gatherings before expeditions, chant to the stars, bless their canoes, and offer symbolic gifts to Tangaroa. The rituals are not relics, they are active, pulsing bridges between generations. The ocean, after all, never forgets. Each year, as the 7th lunar month ripens in the heart of Vietnam, a gentle hush falls over villages and cities alike. It is not a silence of absence, but of reverence. Tet Trung Nguyen, the Vietnamese ghost festival, is when the boundary between the living and the dead softens, and time folds in on itself like the careful layers of a lotus petal. This sacred period, sometimes called the Festival of Wandering Souls, is one of the most intimate, spiritually charged rituals in Vietnamese culture, a moment when ancestral remembrance becomes the axis of existence. The Ghost Month. A calendar of the invisible Tet Trung Nguyen is rooted in Buddhist and Taoist traditions, particularly the belief in the 7th month, or Thang Ko Hon, a time when the gates of the underworld open, and spirits are released to roam among the living. These spirits may be restless ancestors, wandering souls without families, or ghosts seeking closure. The 15th day of the month, known as Ram Thang Bay, marks the festival's peak, coinciding with Vu Lan, a Buddhist celebration of filial piety and maternal gratitude similar in spirit to the Ulambana festival in Mahayana Buddhism and the Chinese Zhongyuan festival. But in Vietnam, this commemoration becomes more than just a rite. It becomes a moment of national stillness. Even those who may not attend pagodas will light incense in their homes, burn paper offerings, and whisper the names of those who came before them. It is an act of love extended across dimensions, a table for the departed. In many Vietnamese homes, you will see an altar set with care and quiet intensity. On these ancestral tables, food is prepared not for the family, but for the spirits. Whole chickens, sticky rice, tropical fruits, and small bowls of salt and rice are offered, each chosen not for extravagance, but for memory. The scent of incense curls upward, said to carry prayers toward the other world. Beside the dishes, families burn paper effigies of money, clothes, even motorbikes or cell phones, symbols of comfort meant to ease the wandering soul's journey. These offerings are not merely symbolic. They are acts of relational repair. In Vietnamese cosmology, ancestors play an active role in the lives of the living. They bless, they warn, they guard. But when forgotten, they may also become restless, a source of misfortune or inner unease. Tet Trung Nguyen is the yearly reckoning, a time to renew the bonds of family that transcend death. In rural areas, villagers sometimes gather at community altars to make public offerings for unclaimed souls, the spirits of the dead who have no family left to honor them. This act of collective care for the forgotten is called Kung Ko Hon, and it reflects a deep cultural ethic. Even the most lonely spirits deserve compassion. Monks, chants, and the opening of the gates. At Buddhist temples, the air thickens with the sound of bells and chants. Monks recite sacred sutras, particularly the Vulan Bon Kin, which tells the story of Mukkian Lien Maudgalyayana, a disciple of the Buddha who sought to rescue his mother from the tortures of hell by offering food and prayers on her behalf. His devotion and the Buddha's guidance became the origin of the Ghost Festival, a narrative woven into the Vietnamese version of filial piety. During temple rituals, the faithful kneel with folded hands, eyes closed, as offerings are consecrated through mantras and fire. In some temples, lanterns are floated on rivers to guide spirits safely back to the afterlife. In others, monks ring a great bell, the Chuang U Min, whose deep, trembling tone is believed to echo through dimensions, calling lost souls back to light. This sound, like a sleeping bell from the depths of memory, is central to the experience of Tet Trung Nguyen. It is not a bell of alarm, but of remembrance. It is the voice of the invisible, singing through time, between fear and love. Like many ghost festivals across Asia, Vietnam's Tet Trung Nguyen holds a duality: fear and love, reverence and caution. Parents often warn children not to wander outside too late during the ghost month. Superstitions abound: do not swim. Do not hang clothes outside after dark. Do not pick up money on the ground, for it might belong to a spirit. These practices, though rooted in tradition, serve a deeper psychological function. They train the young to respect boundaries between life and death, self and other, now and always. But underneath the fear is tenderness, the kind of love that lays out a meal for the dead, even when no one is watching, the kind of grief that endures for generations, kept alive not through sorrow, but through ritual. Vietnamese ancestors are not gone. They are guests who return every year, just for a little while, to sit at the table of memory, a living ritual. In today's Vietnam, the tradition remains vivid. Young people burn offerings made of modern paper replicas, credit cards, passports, designer clothes, a surreal blend of tradition and consumer culture. In the cities, apartment dwellers improvise altars on balconies. In the countryside, families gather by candlelight, sharing stories of those who once walked with them. And yet, even in this changing world, the core of Tet Trung Nguyen holds: memory is not something you keep. It's something you feed, you light, you invite in again and again. In this way, the Vietnamese Ghost Festival becomes not a performance for the dead, but a ritual that keeps the living honest. It reminds us that identity is not individual, but inherited. That our lives do not begin at birth, nor end at death. That somewhere, across the veil of smoke and song, a hand is still reaching out. And every year, for a brief moment, we remember to take it. You sit cross-legged on a woven mat, the air perfumed with a rising curl of frankincense. In a quiet Ethiopian village or a bustling urban neighborhood, time slows as the first bean is washed. This is not just a drink. This is Bana, the sacred heart of Ethiopian hospitality, conversation, and ancestral communion. The Ethiopian coffee ceremony is unlike anything else in the world. It's not a mere caffeine routine, but an ancient, ritualized performance that holds together family, culture, and spirit. 3 cups are served, each with a name, each with a purpose. And every step, from the washing of the green beans to the final pour, is a gesture of respect for time, togetherness, and the divine, a ritual rooted in origins. Ethiopia is widely accepted as the birthplace of coffee. According to legend, it was in the ancient highlands of Kaffa, where a goatherd named Kaldi noticed his animals becoming unusually energetic after eating red berries from a certain tree. Monks eventually began to brew the berries to stay awake during prayers. And from there, coffee spread slowly through the Islamic world and beyond. But in Ethiopia, coffee never became merely utilitarian. Instead, it became sacred. The word buna in Amharic refers not only to the drink, but also to the spiritual and cultural space it creates. The coffee ceremony evolved from this reverence a way to honor the plant, the guests, and the ancestors all at once, the woman as ritual keeper. Traditionally, the ceremony is performed by a woman, often the matriarch of the household. She wears a white cotton dress called a habesha chemise, sometimes embroidered in rich geometric patterns. She begins by spreading fresh grass and aromatic flowers across the floor, symbolic of a living, sacred ground. Three-legged charcoal burners are lit, and as the beans roast in a flat pan, the rich, earthy aroma fills the air. The woman will often wave the roasting pan toward her guests, inviting them to inhale the scent, a sensual, symbolic blessing, roasting from green to black. The beans are washed, then roasted over open flame while being continuously stirred. It's not done quickly. The slow roasting is meditative, rhythmic, like a whispered chant without words. The smell that arises smoky, oily, sharp is a core element of the ceremony, triggering memory and mood. Once roasted, the beans are ground using a wooden mortar and pestle. The rhythmic pounding is another music of the ritual, the echo of generations, unchanged across centuries. The grounds are then added to a jabina, a round-bottomed, long-necked black clay pot filled with boiling water, the jabina and the first pour. The jabina is placed directly on the fire. As it heats, bubbles form in its belly, and a hiss escapes the spout almost like a sigh. When the coffee is ready, it is poured in a long, graceful arc from a height into tiny handleless cups called sinai. No sugar or milk is added at this stage. The brew is thick, black, and potent. And here comes the first cup, abul, tona, baraka. The Ethiopian coffee ceremony is always conducted in 3 rounds. Abul, first cup, the strongest. It opens the ceremony and signifies welcome. Elders or special guests are always served first. It's a moment of attention, quiet, and gratitude. Tona, second cup, weaker, but more social. It represents continuation, warmth, and discussion. Conversations stretch across generations. This is where secrets are shared, deals are made, and grievances are soothed. Baraka, third cup, literally means blessing. It is the final and softest brew. Symbolically, it carries the spirit of community and farewell. It is often said that to drink all 3 cups is to become part of the family. Sometimes, a 4th round called dareya is added in rural areas, but this is rare and more informal. Incense, silence, and the dead incense, usually frankincense or myrrh, is burned throughout the ritual. The smoke rises in slow spirals, like prayers made visible. Children play quietly around the edges, but even they understand this is sacred time. For many, the coffee ceremony is also a connection to the dead. The smell of the roasting beans and incense becomes a bridge to memory. Some Ethiopian Orthodox homes perform coffee ceremonies in honor of deceased relatives, especially on commemoration days or after funerals. The slow pace and repetitive gestures function as a form of meditation or mourning, a sacred pause in the rush of daily life. Coffee as reconciliation beyond spiritual significance. The ceremony is also a tool of diplomacy. In villages, neighbors might hold a coffee ceremony after a dispute. Sitting face to face over the slow preparation, tensions often dissolve. It's difficult to stay angry when time itself has softened the air between you. Even today, in many Ethiopian households, the phrase "let's have coffee" is an invitation not to drink, but to connect. From rural homes to global ritual. Though deeply traditional, the Ethiopian coffee ceremony has traveled with the diaspora. In cities like Addis Ababa, Washington, D.C., and Toronto, Ethiopian restaurants often offer abbreviated versions of the ritual. But within homes, the full ceremony remains a cherished practice. It is also increasingly recognized as a form of intangible cultural heritage. In 2010, Ethiopia formally submitted the ceremony to UNESCO's representative list, citing its value in promoting peace, identity, and intergenerational wisdom. Time slowed. In a world where coffee often comes from paper cups in drive-thrus, the Ethiopian coffee ceremony is a quiet resistance. It reminds us that some things, conversation, memory, healing, take time. When you sit in a room scented by frankincense, with smoke coiling around a cracked jabina, and sip slowly from the third round of bunna, you are not just tasting coffee. You are tasting the patience of centuries, the hospitality of ancestors, and the silence between words. The forest is never silent in Papua New Guinea. At dawn, the mist curls like ancestral breath between the thatched rooftops of Sepik River villages, where drums whisper to the mountains and parrotfish glimmer beneath dugout canoes. In this world of over 800 languages and countless clans, the rites of passage are not a single ceremony, but a world unto themselves. To become a man here is not simply to grow taller or stronger. It is to be remade, body and spirit, through a ceremony that binds pain, myth, and transformation into skin. Among the most visually striking and spiritually profound of these rituals is the crocodile scarification ceremony, practiced by the Chambri and Iatmul peoples of the Sepik River region. It is not for the faint-hearted. Adolescent boys, sometimes as young as 11 or 12, are taken from the community and secluded in men's spirit houses, called House Tambaran. These sacred structures, often elaborately painted and filled with ancestral relics, become the boys' world for weeks or even months. There, under the gaze of masked elders and sacred totems, they shed their former identities. The ritual centers on a belief that the crocodile is not just a river beast, but a primordial ancestor. In local cosmology, the crocodile was the creator of humans. Therefore, to become a man is to return to that beginning, to be consumed by the crocodile and reborn with its strength. This rebirth is literalized in the body. Over several hours or days, elder initiates use sharp bamboo slivers or razors to carve rows of deep cuts into the chest, back, arms, and sometimes thighs of the initiate. The incisions are made in symmetrical patterns, forming the bumpy ridges of crocodile skin. Salt and ash are rubbed into the wounds not to heal, but to raise the scars. The pain is excruciating, but it is the point. As anthropologist Gilbert Hurt observed in his study of Melanesian masculinity, the pain serves as a psychic rupture between childhood and adult life. It is believed that only by enduring physical agony and shedding blood can the boys break ties with their mothers and enter the realm of the ancestors. This is not cruelty. It is a metaphysical necessity. A passage written in flesh. There is silence during the scarring. No cries are permitted. To weep or wince is to fail the ritual. The initiate must become stone, a vessel emptied of fear. After the cutting, he is confined in the men's house for weeks, his wounds tended with oils and herbs, his mind filled with stories of clan origins, warfare, and sacred taboos. This is where the transformation deepens. The physical pain recedes, and in its place emerges a worldview. He learns the names of spirits, the dances of the crocodile, the language of the dead. But not all rites are scarring rituals. Across the highlands and islands of Papua New Guinea, initiation practices take other forms: tooth removal, fire walking, sub-incision, or symbolic burial. In some societies, boys are ceremonially swallowed by a spirit monster, a masked elder then vomited days later as reborn men. These metaphors of death and rebirth are universal across the region. And they are not just theatrical. In societies without writing, where myth lives in the body and memory, such symbolic acts are scripture. Even rain becomes sacred. Among some groups, a downpour during the scarring is seen as a blessing, a purification from the sky. Bone and rain, cut and cleanse. As anthropologist Michael Wesch noted during his immersive fieldwork among the Mountain OK people, every element: wind, insects, chance participates in the rite. The forest is not a backdrop, but a witness. Women too have their rituals, though often less publicly documented. Initiation for girls may involve first menstruation ceremonies, seclusion, and tattooing. In some coastal areas, girls are adorned with shell jewelry and ritually bathed by elder women. These ceremonies affirm fertility, beauty, and female ancestral lines, binding them to matrilineal wisdom. Yet modernity presses at the edges. Missionaries, schools, and state systems have sought to ban or suppress these rituals. Scarification in particular has come under scrutiny as primitive or unsafe, but many communities fiercely protect the rites, adapting where needed, some replacing razors with symbolic marking, others shortening the seclusion period. To many, these rituals are not curiosities or relics. They are the soul of the clan. There is also resistance to misrepresentation. Outsiders have long fetishized these ceremonies, reducing them to tribal tattoos or sensational stories. But for those within the tradition, the crocodile scars are not decoration. They are scripture. Each line speaks of lineage, of pain carried with grace, of a young boy who died and returned a man not through conquest, but endurance. And when the initiate emerges from the house tambaran, body aching and glistening, he is not the same. His mother may cry softly, elders nod, the village gathers. There may be feasting, drums, and slow dances beside the river. But above all, there is silence. The kind of silence reserved for holy things. The scars will fade in color, but never in meaning. In years to come, when the boy becomes a father or a chief, he will carry the memory not just in skin, but in story. And one day, it will be his hands holding the razor, whispering to the next trembling soul that the crocodile waits not to eat, but to awaken. The fire has dimmed. The feathers have fallen still. The incense has curled its final spiral into the air, and across the earth's vast and ancient skin, the rites of remembrance have all been whispered into silence. Tonight, You have wandered barefoot through ash and echo, through temples built from bone, prayers carved in air, and songs made of spinning dust. You've seen hands rise toward stars, eyes close in trance, and voices carry through drums older than history. Each ritual, be it sung in Sanskrit, whispered in Quechua, danced in silence, or painted in sand, has held one thing in common: the human longing to belong. We gather because we forget. We speak the names of the dead so they don't vanish again. We offer flowers, fire, blood, and milk, not because the gods need them, but because we do. Because the act of offering makes the invisible feel real. Because mystery, when shared, becomes meaning. And now, it's your turn to let go. There is no more story to hold, no more drum to follow. Only this moment, wrapped in quiet. Let your breath soften. Let your limbs go weightless. The ceremonies of the world will continue. Whether you are awake or not, now you're safe. The world can wait. Sweet dreams.